How is it going, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? It is I, Zimzilla, back again once again. And as you may have seen, G98Defender is going to be coming back on for a stream. And in the meantime, while I get everything in order, I'll be sending him a link as well as other people links. So if you do want to join the stream and help out 98 Defender as he talks about this, you're more than welcome to. I just sent him the link. Also sending someone else the link too if he wants to jump in. Same guy, it's Theo from the last stream. Of course, we never got that round 2, but if he wants to support G98 Defender and his points or wants to make all new points of his own, he's more than welcome to. We'll just kind of let people settle in and get started. Checking comments. Looks like people got this all settled. Go, move that out of the way. And if people are wondering right now, I am just getting resources and stuff set up. So typical stuff I do for the 98 debates. I get the PowerPoint ready, scripts, all that stuff. But as people file in, it's going to be good to talk to y'all. Because we've got one person in chat. Happy for that. If also, if I know you don't have the what's it called? If you do not have any of my contact information, but you have Discord, it's Zol99 775. Right there. Just send me a message on Discord if you want to join the debate. Of course, you're gonna have to be on the side of 98 Defender because I don't really like having help in debates because it's my channel. Obviously, people are going to be a little new, maybe a little skittish. If they need help, that's fine, but I'm not someone who's going to want to dogpile people. So that's there. You can go back into the log of the history if you need to, but I'm also going to put a chat that shows what my Discord information is if you want to help me right now. Or if you want to join the stream right now to help out Defender. So there's that. And now we wait. And in the meantime, while Defender's getting his stuff ready to join, you can ask me some questions. And if there's any audio being picked up, I hopefully is not, because family's doing a lot of family stuff. So is what is. What else would be important to bring up? To my knowledge, nothing else of import. Also, actually, what I will say is Brian's channel. Brian was one of the guys who was on my later 98, or actually one of my earliest 98 debates. We were doing some King of the Monster stuff because I was doing some watching of that because I'm going to be in a video involving that. That's going to be real fun. But of course, if you don't know his channel, it's HDD Productions. Give him a like, give him a follow, and you'll see us get to all kinds of shenanigans when those videos come out. Oh, look, is Brandon. What's going on, man? I just bought the 84 figure, if you're wondering. So once that comes in, I'll let you know, and then I could ship that off to you for a custom paint job. But yes, I know he had thought about doing it earlier, but Brandon over here, really cool guy, creator of Last Magiga, but he also is a pretty good painter. You can see some of his models that he paints in his kits that he does on his DeviantArt, which is Skull Ghidorah. And if you want something done from him, you could probably do it for a good commission. Just show him what you want painted, and he could probably give you a good price for it. But in the meantime, right now, we are just waiting for G98Defender so he can start his little debate here. But in the meantime, if any of y'all got questions for me, anything that you think is interesting, feel free to ask it, and I will answer to the best of my ability, of course. And actually, since we're still waiting, I think a few things that I can bring up for housekeeping is there is something big that I'm going to be working on the channel. It's still being written right now, editing it out, getting some sound effects going so I can get that all prepared. But I think it's going to be really interesting. I hope you all like it. It is going to be audio drama related. And of course, kaiju related, and it goes without saying. But it looks like our guest is in chat, so I will add him to the stream. Welcome.
Hello there. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you fine. Does the one sec? There we go. I think there's echo on your end.
It must be from the microphone or something.
Do you still have the stream up in the background?
I muted the stream because I was watching.
Okay.
I muted it though.
Let me just see. Test. Okay, yeah, I can still hear it. Are you projecting your audio out from what's it called? Is the audio from me coming directly out your PC, or do you have headphones on?
I don't have headphones on. I just have my laptop.
Okay. You don't have like earbuds or anything?
Earbuds? Let me try it. I don't think I used them last time.
Okay. I'd probably say if anything, probably just need to mute my stream, but you'll be able to hear me just fine if you have the normal StreamYard going, but just having the X'd out of the YouTube stream.
Yeah, I mean, I just have the StreamYard link you sent me. I muted the stream I was watching on my computer. I'll try to see if I can get my brother's headphones. So
well, no, it sounds fine now, but if it hikes up again, might need to do that. But for now, it sounds good.
All right, yeah, I just lowered the volume on my laptop.
Okay, that probably explains it then.
All right.
Okay. So, of course, it's been a while since you've been on a channel, but mind reintroducing yourself to the audience?
All right. Well, I had a bit of a rebranding since last time, because last time, I conceded to the fact that there are some things that I acknowledge as technically flawed, stuff I can't defend. As of now, I'm going by G98 Appreciator, where I just show my appreciation for the 98 film. I just show off like cool facts, trivia, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, I would say the kind of spawning of this debate, let me get it up here on Twitter, because we had wanted to have the discussion kind of transition into a more verbal back and forth, because that would probably work better than the limitations of Twitter.
Yeah.
But nope, that's the actual Blue Nova tweet itself. Let me share this screen. There we are. You can see that fine, right?
Yeah.
And y'all can see that perfectly fine too on my end, so that's good. So this is specifically a tweet from Blue Nova. I'll just read out the tweet itself. I'll share the entire thread. Some people are reading the quoted scene as an insult to the OG American Godzilla, but is it? Question mark. Is it any more degrading than the treatment monsters like Hedorah and Karamakris received. Plus, director Ryo Kimura apparently liked Godzilla 98. And Penny Blood's the interviewee, and actually it wasn't just Kitamura, but it was also Tomiyama and Kitamura. But we'll just read the entire interview. So, you quoted saying that you renamed Hollywood's 1998 version of the monster Zilla because they took the god out of Godzilla. When I read that quote, I interpret it to be a slam against Hollywood Godzilla. I'm getting the impression now that your statement was referring to spiritual interpretation of Godzilla in Japan versus Hollywood's monster interpretation. It really wasn't meant as a put down. Is that correct? Shogo Tomiyama specifically saying yes, because Hollywood's Godzilla is just a normal monster. He's not a god. Hollywood treated Godzilla as a live monster or live animal. They shoot him down with missiles and all that. Quite a few fans hate that version of Godzilla. Why did you think of the Hollywood movie? Were you disappointed with Hollywood's interpretation of your star performer in 98? No, there was always good communication between Tokyo and Hollywood. We knew exactly how they were going to do it, and we knew what Godzilla was going to look like. So as a movie, there's no complaining. Ryo Kitamura, I like the film. I like most of that director's films. And going back to my tweet specifically, I said, this puts the was made an insult argument to bed. And since that was my point, that's essentially my point, was that it we know for clearly that this wasn't made as an insult. So what would be your defense for because you had said something, and actually we'll just scroll down for you. But you want to just kind of give your thesis overall?
Oh, well, I was just pointing to the fact that when it comes to using it as an insult, I tend to see it coming more from people who don't like the film. Like, they'll say, oh, Toho obviously did not like the film because he was treated so poorly in the Final Wars fight, you know?
Mm-hmm. But the argument that I'm making is that it was made as an insult argument can't really work, because it would imply that it was the directorial intent rather than fan interpretation.
Yeah. So, I agree that, you know, it's not so much an insult, considering that other monsters from the Toho movies got like the same treatment overall in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Because
not to mention, some got worse, because, for example, Ebra gets taken down by soldiers on foot, although they're mutants, but still wasn't even defeated by a giant monster in his first appearance. Hedorah, completely reduced role. His whole scenes are cut.
Yeah.
Kumonga is literally thrown off into the sunset. He actually isn't given a proper death. Karamakris is left impaled. Really, the only monsters that get any kind of respect in the film, if we were to say that any of these were done as insults, would have been King Caesar, Rodan, and Anguirus, because they're just kind of left there beaten. Godzilla roars, moves on. And then Monster X / Kaiser Ghidorah, because that monster is the only one that's actually shown to be an equal to Godzilla.
Yeah, I agree, you know, because yeah, I didn't think it was so much as an insult, you know, because of like the other treatment on the monsters. And I want to discuss more about what we said further down the thread of like the validity of differentiating Zilla from Godzilla 98, whether or not it's valid, and then Godzilla 98's validity as a Godzilla.
Okay, so I would say I'll start off with my points and summarizing here. So when he says that they renamed the Hollywood 1998 version of the monster Zilla, so obviously this implies that the intent behind creating Zilla was to use the American Godzilla. We know this from other facts, where it was stated that they wanted to add other monsters and they realized they could use the American Godzilla. So in the spirit, even if we're going to say that they're differentiated by copyright, in the spirit of the intent of creating Zilla, they are the same character. In terms of like appearance, you could say that they are different, but because you're taking an already established character and creating a whole new trademark and a new monster, it's unprecedented to some degree, and as such, it's fair to call Godzilla 98 Zilla in this case, because for all intents and purposes, the point behind making the new monster was to use it and therefore let it live on.
Will it be any similar or dissimilar to Rodan versus Fire Rodan?
In the case of Fire Rodan Fire Rodan's a form rather than an incarnation. So, for example, if when we see, it's actually interesting that you bring up Fire Rodan because in the Atari games, you have Rodan in the first two games, but it's only in Unleashed, and I think only specifically in the Wii version where he's called Fire Rodan, even though he's using the Heisei Rodan design. So unlike with Fire Rodan, where Fire Rodan became like a whole new different out there design, Rodan becomes Fire Rodan over the course of a film, unlike with Zilla and 98, where 98 was a monster in a film, and then that whole design and character was taken over and implanted into a new film with an entirely new name that is supposed to move it away from the established character it's supposed to be.
All right. I would say that because of the fact that it still has the copyright within the movie, like if I wanted to say like, because I usually use Godzilla only from '98 or Godzilla the series, and I always try to differentiate from Zilla because I think like when it comes to how the Godzilla '98 was created, like it was like intentionally Godzilla created for the movie versus Zilla, which is just like a rebranding that has become its own thing
Mm.
that I still separate from the original movie and series.
So you're saying that because there was care and intent put behind designing 98, it's not present there in Zilla, and therefore that's why there's a differentiation? Or am I getting that wrong?
I do believe so. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I would say in that case, Patrick Tatopoulos has gone on record as being happy his monster was in a film. So his appreciation for what he did in 98 would translate over to Zilla because that is what because he does see Zilla as an extension of his work. So I would say the differentiation that you're making here would not necessarily be the best, if that makes sense.
I can see that, and yeah, I'm aware that Tatopoulos was a good sport about it, and like he acknowledges it as like his monster.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, well, when it comes to the '98 film, um, everyone who contributed to it, like it was an intentional design. It was a reinvention of Godzilla and who he is, but still kept his spirit, as Toho even said. Even if uh, I believe who was in the interview who said like it was a spiritual difference in terms of like
Um,
him being a
Shogo
god.
Tomiyama. Shogo
Oh,
Tomiyama
yeah,
was the one who said
him
that in
being
the
a
interview.
god versus a monster. Um, like the whole premise of the film takes that more nature side to it rather than him being a near invincible, powerful god, and more so an animal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that looking at that side of Godzilla's character, which was even present in the first film and moving forward, I think um, that interpretation and execution in the film still makes it valid as a Godzilla for the film.
I would say in that case, if the argument is that because it's an interpretation and we're going into a side of Godzilla that is valid, I would go back to I think I made this argument before, but we see in Godzilla 84 where
Hmm.
Godzilla is still acting more animalistic, but it doesn't um justify dropping the aspects of his character that are important, such as being immune to conventional weaponry, and having an atomic breath, because those are like intrinsic to what makes Godzilla's character. And if we remove the fact that he is indestructible to modern weapons and has an atomic breath, then it's closer to the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which of course we do know influences Godzilla, but in that case, it's even more apparent, especially when you see this a giant reptilian monster attacking New York. This monster in the past has already been an inspiration for Godzilla, but now we're just kind of bringing it back, as it were.
And I would think that that interpretation of like bringing it back around for an American adaptation is still valid. even if like the character's abilities are either changed or don't remain. I think
Mhm.
that as an interpretation, we've seen it happen with other characters who either gain or lose abilities that they didn't have before. Like if a modern Superman movie decided to take away the, I guess, new trademark abilities like heat vision or flying, and we went back to the old Superman where he was just a powerful, strong man.
Who could leap buildings in a single bound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're gonna go by that argument, the thing is the difference between removing Superman's power versus removing Godzilla's powers is the fact that Superman having powers in general and being an alien is what's important to his character. Even if he didn't have heat vision and he was more closer to like how he was originally conceived, he would still have the same traits of his character, rather than with Godzilla, where the atomic breath is a visual representation of his mutation, or um like being affected by the bombs in that way, unlike with Superman's powers. So like I would say a closer comparison, if we're gonna include comic book characters, is that if Batman started killing people and we said this was a new interpretation of Batman, that would be closer to what Godzilla 98 does with a character, rather than, for example, taking away Superman's powers, because Batman choosing to not kill is intrinsic to his character, rather than Superman having heat vision.
Mhm. Is there a differentiation? Is there a difference between powers and character? Because I would argue that um,
I would
that could,
say there is, but in the case of many characters, the powers and how the character uses them can tie directly to what it means for the character. So, for example, um, if we'll go to another Japanese character example, Goku had a tail, and during Dragon Ball, we didn't really know what it meant, except that he could transform into a great ape. But we move over to Dragon Ball Z and we find out that he's an alien, we find out that the tail is intrinsic to the species, and that that's a key part of their traditions as Saiyans. So if there was an interpretation where Goku didn't transform into a great ape, or did, but it wasn't tied to him being a member of a certain race, it does impact his character and what his character does mean. So there's a top on effect. And we do see that in Dragon Ball Evolution, where he does transform into an Ozaru, but it's not like a trait of his species. Rather, it's a just trait of Goku as a character. And therefore, the interpretation has a muddied meaning behind what it means to be Ozaru. And instead, he's just a minion of Piccolo, who also is butchered because of his changed origins and abilities.
okay. Uh, well, I would say that like I wouldn't say 98 is as close a comparison to Dragon Ball Evolution. I would say that because if we're gonna go back to the Superman thing, if it's his origins as an alien that's important to the character, I would say
Mm,
that the origins within the atomic origins that Emmerich and crew still retain for Godzilla, and then I would also argue that appearance would be another show of the atomic origin because
mm.
of how he was designed as a chimera mutation that evolved past
Well,
his.
if we'll start off with origins first. So obviously we know he's mutated from an atomic bomb, but obviously there's a lot of other giant monsters that are mutated by the bombs. So the atomic origins does mean something, but also the fact that he was mutated by the bombs became intrinsic to why he was indestructible, because the power of the bomb is therefore personified via Godzilla's durability. And for if a creature born of the atomic bombs is then inferior to less powerful weaponry, then the point of him being mutated kind of loses its meaning. And even if we were to say that it's more environmental, where it shows that like the bombs are affecting the environment, and the environment's going to strike back, a lot of people, and I think you've also said this before in the past, that like Godzilla doesn't directly harm people, he's just an animal. Then if we're going by that argument, then really, like, the idea of him being mutated from the bomb has very little to no bearing on him as a character in that sense. And what was the other part you wanted? What was the other part you said that was important besides from his origins? Oh, but oh yeah, appearance.
Yeah.
So with him being a chimera, again, that also makes sense, but also based on his origins, rather than him being a prehistoric creature, he's a mutated iguana. But the other thing was that because of him being a product of a more anachronistic time, the menace of his design rings more true, because it obviously paleontology was different at that time, but we also see that like it was still a much more primordial and antediluvian sort of understanding of paleontology. While now he resembles more modern dinosaurs because that's what dinosaurs are, even though he's not a dinosaur. So therefore, it kind of muddies the aspect of why his design is important to look the way it does.
Yeah,
And
so
especially
you
because like another thing is that going to 2014, we see that you can have a design that's very different from other designs, but also doesn't strip away what makes the design iconic.
okay? So I remember you talked about the whole dinosaur revolution that was going on.
Yeah.
I forget when, but then you also say like, are you saying that like because Godzilla's appearance did not change through the dinosaur revolution,
Yeah.
therefore he does not need should nor should he be anymore
Well, so the dinosaur revolution, well, the dinosaur, not the dinosaur revolution, the dinosaur renaissance began
oh
in the
Renaissance, right?
60s. Yeah. So, and even through the 60s, Godzilla's design really didn't change too much. And by 1984, which would only come out 2 years before The Dinosaur Heresies by Robert Bacher was published, and 4 years before Predatory Dinosaurs of the World by Gregory S. Paul was was published. So the point I was making is that because Godzilla's design didn't change to represent more accurate depictions of dinosaurs, it depicted an iconic aspect of the character, and that was still respected because the filmmakers understood that these aspects of his design are what's important.
I see.
And they all feed into each other like a loop, because a good character, when it's designed, the design should reflect the character should be reflected in the design. So it's essentially like a circular logic fallacy in a way, but because one is strengthening the other, they create this kind of interconnected but also beneficial loop where they're going back and forth, and good character designers are able to do that with a character.
But could a more modern interpretation of the design be valid? Like, let's say we just took 2014 and made it horizontal and slimmer as 98. Would that still be valid? Or would it be
In
diminished
I would
because
say, well, I would say I would look at that. If so, are we saying that it's essentially looking exactly the same except thinner and hunched over?
yeah,
Does he still have all his powers?
sure.
So he has all his powers. His role in the film is essentially the same.
Sure.
I would say that that would be a mark against the character, but there would still be more aspects that are faithful in 2014 as a story and for the character of Godzilla than there is for 98. So it's a knock-on effect. So not only is 98's design less faithful, but also his character is less faithful. While in 2014, he has both of those. But in the hypothetical you're proposing, one point is knocked off. And actually,
All
one
right.
second. Let me stop sharing that. I'm going to share to my other screen. So 1 second, guys. We're going to go stream section for a moment. There we go. So going back to this slide here, with both the Decker Godzilla and the Winston design, they're both more closer to a traditional Godzilla. One maintains the nuclear origin, one doesn't to a degree. Both have a more original look. One isn't killed off, but one is. One takes Godzilla seriously, and these obviously being the aspects that we know that were documented for Godzilla 98 that were shown not only in things like the Sci-Fi Japan article, but also in the leaked document that we have for when Toho and Sony were getting their designs or getting the film ready for production.
All right. would you say? Let's see. When it comes to the design aspect of Godzilla, how close does it need to be to the original to be valid?
So how close does it have to be to the original to be valid? Okay, actually, that's a good one right there. I'll share the screen again because. So even looking at, let's see if I can find the right slide. There it is. So even comparing 54 to Shin, Earth, and Ultima, there are differences. And just for the sake of this, I'm going to import a 54 here just for comparison. So unlike with 54, Shin's got reddish skin, the arms are smaller, tail super long, face on the tail, whole new powers that were never introduced, has a very interesting set of weaknesses where he'll just power down for a little bit. Obviously, lack of toes being different, etc. But because this is still a mutated creature, it carries the silhouette closer than 98 does and is just as powerful to a degree as 54 and still means similar things. That's why this is valid in terms of interpretation. Earth is also very different. He's not a reptile, he's a gigantic plant. And instead of having a traditional flowing breath in the mouth, it kind of shoots outside of his face. But he's still an embodiment of natural wrath, but also has aspects of biology baked into him that can make some sci-fi mumbo jumbo kind of sense to him, but also still carries a more traditional silhouette and still has the bare minimum powers. Ultima, ironically, is more closer to 54 than these two in design, although there are still some more differences. He's more hunched over. Toes are different here. His origins completely unrelated to the bomb, but he does still serve as this menacing antagonistic force when humans have been messing with something that they still don't understand and need to be kind of understand the need for moderation, as it were. Because, I wouldn't say Godzilla is anti-nuclear everything, but is very much anti-nuclear weapons and anti-war in a sense. And of course, we already talked about 2014, but when you look at all of these designs, just physically, they're closer to 98 than 98 is to any of them. And actually, I'm curious, out of these four designs, what do you think would be the closest 98 shares to one of these? Just physically.
The closest one to 98?
Physically. Yeah, physically.
I would say Ultima.
And why would you say Ultima?
The more dinosauristic proportions in terms of modern paleontology, I would say.
Okay. One sec.
And then, other than that, I would say there are some more reptilian-esque aspects to it. And then, the spines are also similar in terms of curving forward. And then looser tail.
I would say, so with the spines curving forward, would you say that, actually, I'll move this over here. Would you say that the spines are closer to 98 on Ultima, or are they closer to something like 54 or a more traditional take on Godzilla?
It's closer in the sense of the maple leaf shape.
Yeah.
And then I would ask do Godzilla's spines need to retain a maple leaf design?
I don't think they need to maintain a maple leaf design, but when looking at all of these designs, and for example, we'll do 2014. 2014 does not have the more maple leaf looking shape, but overall body, 2014 and Shin have much closer proportions than 98 has with 2014 Shin or 54.
And then would that
I would say, for example, the spines are closer to 98, but body, powers, theme, closer to 54.
And would you say that that detriment is large in part due to the more modern-esque design aspect in terms of dinosaurs?
For 2014?
Not for 98. 98 is lesser because of the modern recreation aspect of the design.
Well, I would say that it's lesser in a sense because it's taking aspects of modern dinosaurs, but then also scrapping much of what makes the design, the silhouette of Godzilla iconic. So, let me Oh, I just went to the wrong one. Move that out. Back up. Back up. Like there's still naturalistic proportions between these two, but we do see with 98 a more a need to be more quote unquote scientifically accurate with dinosaurs and not just naturalistic. While with 2014, we do see a design that is naturalistic but also understands the need to keep certain traits of Godzilla iconic.
I would argue a defense because of the reinvention aspect of it, but I don't think it also
But
strengthens.
also in that case, Shin was a reinvention, but it's still more faithful to 54 than 98 is to 54.
But it's also a reinvention in terms of design rather than strictly abiding by the silhouette. When creating it, Emmerich wasn't concerned too much with keeping the 100% faithful silhouette of it. He gave Totopoulos some more creative freedom, but also the
Well, then
design.
that would also I would say that also kind of hurts your argument against having to respect 98 as being an incarnation, because since Toho did get rights to the design and just be able to use it however they wished, it would, if Emmerich didn't respect the iconic nature of the design, then what would be the ethical or even just pragmatic argument between differentiating the two and being rigid with calling one Godzilla 98 while the other Zilla?
How much of the ethical defense for it are we putting in? Like, is it
I'm
unethical?
asking you, what would be like, what, how would you justify having the distinction based on respecting the design if the creator chose not to respect the designs that it's trying to it's choosing not to take after?
I would say, how would I justify showing respect to this incarnation?
Yeah, tonight. Well, why would you? What would be your argument for respecting 98 as a incarnation of Godzilla instead of people just calling it Zilla 98? Then, because obviously Emmerich didn't respect the original Godzilla design, so then why should a fan respect 98 in that case? Because if we're talking about it being a reinvention, we've seen reinventions now that can be faithful, and we've also seen redesigns that can be faithful. So overall, Emmerich fails on multiple accounts to even show like a bare minimum of respect for it. And if he was trying to be closer, the argument could be made that at least he was trying to respect what came before. But we know that there's tons of evidence how disparaging he was about the franchise as a whole and his want and deliberate need to stray away from it. So how do you justify a fan having to show respect for the design?
It was, I would say that the design is large in part due to the creative implementations from Patrick Totopoulos.
Well, why would they be limitations rather than creative choice?
Well, because strictly from a design aspect, I think because Patrick didn't like create this out of incompetence, or I don't think
I'm not
disrespect.
attributing it to incompetence, but Emmerich obviously did not want to use a traditional design because he decided to scrap the Devant designs.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm not attributing malice on
yeah,
Totopoulos's
I
part,
know,
but
I know.
I am attributing malice to Emmerich at least.
I wouldn't say it was mostly malice from Emmerich.
How would you,
Even
in that case, I would say, how would you define malice?
if he blatantly showed a large amount of disrespect towards the Toho design.
In that
And
case, there is many
yeah,
evidences of like him calling the design like just a guy in a rubber suit or a fat Godzilla. There's many examples of that. So there is ill will towards the original Godzilla designs.
yeah.
So I think that is enough of a margin where we can say malice is involved.
Then it would be going back to Patrick Totopoulos, because all Emmerich said was just to make him fast.
Well,
And
you could still make a design fast, but also still make it faithful. Let me
of course, but
go
he also
back real quick.
gave, because like Patrick Totopoulos is an artist, he's gonna take his own interpretation of it. Patrick Totopoulos like knew of Godzilla. He knew what Godzilla was. I don't think and because of that, I don't think it strayed too far from what Godzilla is in terms of his own creative inputs when it came to how he made the spines, the dinosaur-esque appearance.
Well, again, if we're looking here,
Mm-hmm.
both William Stout, Ricardo Delgado, Crash McQuarrie, and Joey Orsko, all of them made very different designs. All of them, again, post dinosaur revolution. All and specifically Delgado's design
Mm-hmm.
show a level of agility and quickness
I would.
that the 90 like there's dynamism to how especially the later two designs are, where it's not impossible to make a traditional design agile and fast. So that wasn't a limitation on, like, being fast was not a limitation that a traditional design couldn't do, would be my point.
Yeah, but as fast as 98, I would say that a lot of the dynamic artistry in these drawings specifically is due in part to them being drawings. The closest we've seen to this would probably be in GVK with how Godzilla moves. He's definitely more agile, but he's
Mhm.
not running around buildings and leaping like
Okay.
atop them like 98, which is what
Well,
Emmerich
again, well,
wanted.
that also how 98 acts in the films is also a aspect of his character being less faithful as well. But one second. Actually,
But
I think it
then,
was so because even if we let me take the 2014.
mhm.
There we go.
Well, then I guess I would ask
Because
you.
like even looking at
Mhm.
these two designs here, there's definitely there's actually a much more clearer dinosaur influence in comparison to something like 2014, where there could definitely be a lot more agility inferred from this design rather than this design, which is bulky. But even if we're going to put this Godzilla at the same size as 98, there's definitely, and maybe it may look uncanny, we'll never know, but if we're gonna do an argument where 2014 is faithful and is not agile, so therefore a more faithful design like this can't be agile, I just don't agree with it.
I
Actually,
wouldn't say in terms of agility, but more so the speed of the character. Because yeah,
like
if you make it more faithful, I've seen more faithful. I've also tried my hand at drawing a more faithful 98 incarnation. I would My personal belief is that if you just change the spines, then it'd be a perfect representation of Godzilla.
one argument that a lot of people have with, for example, the 2020 design with King of the Monsters was that a lot of it was done very fan servicey. So, like, for example, changing Godzilla's tail, which looks a little weirder on the design, the spines being obviously 54 inspired. Do you think that that if we were to change just the spines alone, that people wouldn't say that the spines are just to quote unquote please fans? Because remember, the power breath was added to look the way it did because fans were not happy
Mhm.
with a lack of atomic breath.
Well, I mean, well then, can I make the argument in defense of the spines? Because
Yeah.
if we go in between, oh, the spines are what make Godzilla Godzilla, but then we
Mhm.
complain that, oh, it's too fan servicey. Because I've seen more traditional spines on the 98 design, and I think
I
it
have too.
works. It could work, but like the original spines, I think fit the design well.
Well, be the issue that I think I'm having with your argument is that
Hmm.
it's compartmentalizing too many aspects of the design. Where if we just change the spines, that's going to make things better. But even though it's not going to change the fact that he doesn't have an atomic breath and he's not really acting like Godzilla, And if we change the look, it's going to be more faithful. That's going to be a lot better. But then you're still going to run into the problem that he's not acting like Godzilla. If we turn him in, if we keep the design as is, but we make him a more traditional Godzilla, that would probably be the more better scenario, because then at least he's acting more like Godzilla rather than how he actually is in the film, which is why a lot of people like Godzilla the series rather than the movie itself, because we have a Godzilla that's fighting monsters using atomic breath, immune to conventional weaponry, that kind of stuff. But one
But how
second
much?
before you continue, someone wanted.
Yeah.
I have not seen this person on the channel before, and if you have actually been on the channel, then I'm sorry. I like Zilla as a creature design, but it isn't Godzilla because the Zilla part, and I feel cringe when people say Zilla is Godzilla, and you should respect it. If you want to comment on that, because that's still kind of going into the argument that I'm making. Although I'm not saying it, I don't think it's cringe to say it. It's understandable. But what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna ask, how much of Godzilla's powers influence his character in terms of behavior? Like, how
So
should
I would
a
say just
Godzilla
two.
act?
So because Godzilla is immune to conventional weaponry, therefore that means there should be very little the military can do, because it's showing just how far we've progressed when it comes to war, and that we've made such destructive weapons that almost everything else is just absolutely useless, which is why we don't just start chucking nukes at each other, because of the drastic implications that it means. And Godzilla does represent that to a major degree. And outside of just being so much above modern weaponry, having the destructive output in the form of his size, but also his atomic breath, are what's important. Because in my opinion, I don't think Godzilla always needs to have new powers shown off every movie. So just being immune to conventional weaponry as his defense, as a quote unquote defensive power, and then having his offensive power be his atomic breath, outside of just his strength and speed already, are what his powers are tied into when it comes to characters. Because for example, if we're gonna look at Shin Godzilla, the back beams are important to his character because it shows how much he's adapting to the situation, and it also differentiates him from a more traditional Godzilla in that way. But because we know what Godzilla can do normally, seeing him go above and beyond and do something that's an even more drastic display of power is why that scene is so significant. And
And
for example, when Godzilla Filius is killed in the anime trilogy, and then we see Godzilla Earth, we see that like the original Godzilla and just Godzilla as a whole, both of them, they can become so much more powerful. And at this point, you realize that like the tradition, like the idea they use to kill Filius, isn't gonna work on Godzilla because of how powerful he is as a force. And we see that in City on the Edge of Battle, and to a lesser degree, Plant Eater, because that's dealing with a more existential threat rather than a more humans versus Godzilla kind of battle.
and so I guess you would say that, like, Godzilla has to be powerful relative to the story he's in, right?
Yeah, I would say that he has to be powerful relative to the story he's in, but that's also going to have to I'd have to look at instances in the story, like what's going on, for it to for me to be like, yes, this is a good example of this. Because you could say 98 is powerful in his film because he's able to evade the military, but then when you look at what the military does throughout the film, it's brazen incompetence and just really unrealistic choices that for some reason just make me question why they were doing this to fight against Godzilla rather than many other options they could have used.
I would argue otherwise. I mean, when it comes to such an, if we're going with the, because this is like a real world thing, as much as some things might contradict it. We're dealing with an unconventional threat. So like first, like it's treated as an animal, so we just put a trap. When we realize that he's so fast and like he uses the buildings as a defense.
Well, so
To,
with the trap, not only does for some reason O'Neill decide to open up with small arms fire and then starts using tanks and then uses missiles rather than trying to hit hard and fast like the US military tends to do. It does feel weird, especially if like maybe it's just I study military history more than other people who are in the fan base, but I don't think that's true because like just how they go about fighting Godzilla seems odd. And then once Godzilla decides to leave, they just send a couple aircraft to then fight against Godzilla. And we find out that he's colder than the buildings around him, but then is still a massive reptile that is endothermic. So there's just many just logical and scientific contradictions that need to happen to allow 98 to escape that first engagement and not die. Unlike with, for example, 84, 54, or Shin, where being a representation of either a just really destructive force or the bomb, he just shrugs off weaponry and we're still able to see good spectacle.
Mm-hmm. But I would argue that like, because having watched the film, like I would listen to your takes and what you said, and I would go back to the film. I watched the first part of where the military begins firing, and shown on screen is it's not that they just open with small arms fire. They don't even have small arms fire.
No, wait. Okay,
wait.
What you mean small arms fire? What do you mean by that?
Well, do you consider? Well, I guess it could be like rocket launchers.
That's compared to a giant monster. That's small arms fire. So like, if you can lift it, probably small arms. So like M16s, any like LMGs that a soldier's gonna be able to carry on the field, even rockets. That's still much more close to small arms fire than tanks and missiles, which they use afterwards. But since we brought that up and we're gonna talk about scenes in the film, give me your spiel and I will I'm gonna get some clips loaded.
All right. Well, I would also say that from what we see in the film, they don't like just go from small arms to tanks. They actually do it at the same time if you watch the film. Even if it's like maybe a little edited weird, they launch everything at the same time. But like because of editing, I think.
But the thing is that why would they put it in sequential in the order that they did if they were showing it at the same time? Because you could just do a wide shot with them shooting everything, and then have Godzilla react.
But they do. It is a wide shot. We see the people shooting their rocket.
We'll see it in a second because I'm bringing up the scene. Is that that's really cropped weird. Okay. Okay. So we'll share screen here real quick before I change over here. Yo, Zim, glad I can catch a stream. I listen to your streams while drawing sometimes. I like Godzilla 98 design. Not my favorite, how I appreciate the different look and origin of Godzilla. Thank you very much, Eric, for supporting the channel. It's good to see that you actually caught a stream. I'm happy for you, man. Your screen, switch this over. You're gonna share system audio as well. Okay. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are gonna probably have to do. Okay. Let me just hide that for the moment.
Does this one show everything, or because I think
it's just the design scenes. Just the Let me make sure.
I don't think this one shows any of the.
Because I'm shooting. Okay. So yeah, it skips that. So we're just gonna use the film clips version because that does show the scene Godzilla movie clips. And I would sign it to my Netflix, but I don't have. I forget my password at the moment.
Negative Impact. I think that's the best one.
Yeah, it is Negative Impact. Yeah, I just want to. All the clips are here, so. Yeah. Okay. And there's no ads either, so that's good. Okay. So we start here. How's the audio on your end, by the way?
You're fine. The video is.
No. The video is a little low.
A little low, yeah.
Okay. Let me back up. I know.
And I don't know if it's just me, but did you slow down the speed or is it just
honestly this is slow for me, but I think it's normal.
Okay.
Okay. How's this sound?
Sounds good.
Bigger guns.
Is that loud enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've lost communication, sir.
Get us back online.
Fire at will! Sergeant, fire at will!
Oh, so I just want to get that out of the way.
Fire!
So, shot off here, shot here, and then we start seeing these shot off. Actually, I'm back.
We need bigger guns.
I think there's a lag on the video part, or
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sergeant, fire at will! Fire!
So, what's interesting here, I notice, is that we see one shot here, Seth, one.
Yeah, we see the tank and the missile launchers in the background, along with their grenade launchers and such, like right there. Oh, are you still there? I think you crashed. Or are you still there, Zim?
We having connection unstable if you're on Wi-Fi. Try no.
Oh, I can hear you again. Are you there?
Oh, you can hear me again? Okay.
Yeah.
With this shot right here, can you see when my mouse is circling? Or no?
I can see it, but I'm not sure
It's
if
a
there's
little
a lag.
laggy. Yeah. For some reason, I'm not
And
sure
sorry,
why
my dog's
my
barking.
no,
Can
you're
I
good.
go take care of
For
him?
some reason, what was that?
Can I go take care of him?
Yeah, no, take care of him.
Yeah, I don't want the dog barking on stream. Let me just mute this for a sec.
Yeah,
Or mute
no, you're
myself.
good. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, and I'll just do me for the moment. The Mexican. Fred is 60 meters. Fake Fred is 90. Fred Dussy. Interestingly, Fred stood up is like 90 something, and then fake Fred normally is like 90. Interesting little bit of notes there for y'all who are watching. I also want to say I appreciate everyone who's been stopping by. I'm not sure why I'm having an issue with my
Can you hear me,
the
Zim?
connection here. I can hear you. Let me
All right.
get you back here. Okay. So let me share my screen again.
Mm-hmm.
Share screen. Share the audio. Okay. Stream reception. Blah blah. But yeah, can you see what my mouse is scrolling around?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is actually interesting because when you do see that shot there, you see the one tank shot, but you don't see this fire again. You don't see any missiles here, but for some reason they highlight these two missiles, which he does dodge.
Yeah.
So outside of it just being like a weird little inconsistency, when they do fire off, instead they've already alerted Godzilla. We see one missile just never just like disappear entirely, and then he dodges two. So we never see that impact on him. And this is just something I find interesting throughout the entire movie is that anytime something's either should have hit him, it just does not ever hit this Godzilla because of course it's gonna die to missiles. And let me go back to it. I think Fire at Will does show it, I believe.
Yeah. I think you've mentioned it before, like how the missiles clip through him.
Yeah, it's
Would
the
you say
missile
that's like?
clip.
Would you say it's a deliberate decision or just like a mistake?
It's a mistake, but it also shows that the scene, the idea of the scene to have Godzilla just evade through all of this fire wasn't really possible for the directors to pull off. I just want to, yeah. And also, an interesting bit of continuity is that if there was so many winged fighters that could be used in this case here, the fact that they weren't used in their first assault instead of just using 4 aircraft was seems interesting.
I've always found that interesting too.
And then, like it's right there. Yeah, it's like unless we're, and then for some reason you'll see missiles hitting other spots, and unless we're getting like I guess the idea is that hypothetically the military is so incompetent they're not able to hit the lizard because the lizard's moving so fast. Even though when we do see a shot ring off, it never not only should have connected with him, it does nothing. And it's not like you see him get hit because there's a blood effect there. It's quite literally absent.
Yeah, I agree. It does clip through. Of course, my head canon is like, oh, it hit him, but like those type of missiles aren't as deadly as
no, but
jet
that's the
missiles.
same
But
type
of
of
course, it's
vehicles
just
that
headcanon.
it's an interesting headcanon, and it would be a reasonable headcanon to say, except the first trap scene, we see him actively choose to avoid those two missiles. And since we see 3 shots fired, one never makes contact, I'm assuming it's an error, same as the clipping. But when we do see 2 actually fly through the air, he chooses to dodge them. So with headcanons, my opinion is that like I'm not going to bother with it too much. Oh, one sec, I think I'm echoing again. I'm not going to bother with it too much if it doesn't really impact the ideas of the story in any meaningful way. But with that headcanon, it definitely does create some weird inconsistencies and contradictions.
Well, I don't think him dodging even like the smaller missiles isn't too much of a leap. I'd still dodge a rock being thrown at me any more than a gunshot.
Well, you're going to dodge a rock being thrown at you or a gunshot, but if the rock is being shot at you with the same speed as a gunshot, but when one is thrown at you, it just kind of disappears out of existence. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, but is that more so like film error, or
well, because the reason I think it's important is because they designed Godzilla to be this way, and if they can't really make Godzilla do these things without there being these massive instances of like errors, then it may be an issue with how you designed your Godzilla. Because if this was just a normal Godzilla, everything would hit him, it wouldn't affect him, and he would trudge along, have some destruction, maybe fight some fighters, yada yada. One sec, I'm gonna bring up a different clip, but you can give your counter to that.
Well, when it comes to that, like I think there's like some good spectacle in how this Godzilla moves. I like it when he runs through the buildings, when he dodges missiles, even if they clip through him.
Well,
and then when it comes to like Godzilla the series, like if like even if that's more Godzilla, he doesn't really act any more different than he does in the movie, other than like his indestructibility, where he can shrug off missiles that actually hit him.
Well, because remember when outside of New Family, when he has to actually escape the military, because again, just like kind of like his father, but anytime he's being attacked by the military, he usually just shrugs it off in most cases.
He shrugs off the ones that hit him, but every other time he dodges missiles.
Which is interesting because even though he's immune to them, he chooses to dodge them anyway.
Well, I wouldn't say he's exactly immune. Like his skin is like thicker.
Exactly.
But, yeah, he's invulnerable to most weaponry.
The thing is that that's still an issue with the character, but it's a step up from the film 98.
Yeah, I'd agree. But I mean, it's still an aspect of what he is in terms of this reinvention of design. He's more agile, therefore
but
he
again,
can
you can
dodge
still
more
be more
missiles.
agile and still have the aspects of the character that are important, because those aren't mutually. The thing is that those aren't mutually exclusive, like you seem to be implying they are. But I'm gonna go to another scene from a totally different film, and that is Last Jedi, folks.
Oh,
so and this. So we see this here. Did you see that? Or you need me to go back?
I mean, there's still a lag, but I know the scene, so the audio, I can match it to the visualization in my head, so I'll be good.
So, yeah. So I'm gonna mute this. I'm actually gonna put it into slow. Yeah, probably 5%. So Praetorian Guard has 2 knives. Right, blocks. Instead of stabbing her when he's blocked, he decides to then hook her arm, bring her down, and his knife is gone.
Yep.
And then he lifts her up again. And because Rey is supposed to be the hero of the story, not only do we see a villain acting competently to execute her, but then in another move, we see a prop disappear because that'd be inconvenient for Rey surviving throughout the rest of the film. And
But
then obviously, yeah, go. What are you gonna say?
But how much of this is attested to bad choreography and plot armor versus possible editing mistakes and like computer
Do you think
effects?
that 98 having bad effects and therefore them being shrugged off is not also plot armor because he needs to survive till the end of the film?
I don't think so. I mean, him
Why?
clipping through, well, missiles clipping through Godzilla, I wouldn't say is like a deliberate choice. Not too much to the extent where like something that's more noticeable, like the knife, because you have to write or like correct, like you have to actually deliberately say, "Oh, remember to take away the knife here because we can't kill Ray." Or
But remember, they deliberately chose to have Godzilla dodge those same missiles in an earlier scene, but in a later scene when they need him to get into the river, they allow that error to move away and be fine.
would it be, well, how much of that is like deliberately allowing versus, oh, maybe we just missed it, or it's not that much of a big error that we have to like correct it
We do
for
see
the
many of
shot?
these errors, but because Godzilla 98 is supposed to be a more realistic interpretation of a character, having these kinds of errors that could have major implications for the story occur means the film is of lesser quality than a film that doesn't have these errors. And then because the error is tied to changing Godzilla, the error would not be a problem if Godzilla wasn't the way he was in the film. Because if Godzilla was immune to conventional weaponry and we see that film that go through him, we can easily just say, oh, well, they just didn't show an explosion effect. Godzilla's still going to be fine, whether or not it clipped through him or not. But because we know Godzilla 90 is immune to similar missiles of power, having that appear makes you wonder why that mistake was never corrected, because it's going to have implications for the film later on down the line.
I don't think it would for most people. Like,
Well, I'm
I
not
guess
saying
if
it
you
for
look,
most people. I'm asking whether or not it's an objective error or not.
I'd say it. I would say it is an objective error in terms of, oh, they didn't like fix the effects to where they didn't they left in the clipping. Like, it's just an error. I wouldn't say, because I'd say the Ray knife, the disappearing knife, I wouldn't say it's an error. It's a choice they made because they couldn't kill Ray.
Well, also, what's it called? One sec. Because we also in the same whole fire at will scene, we also do see him dodge similar missiles again over his head, which is why they have to do the evasive maneuvers. So clearly, there were deliberate shots that show him evading things because they would hurt him significantly enough to where he probably go down. So having these errors in here is still just as deliberate as the the Praetorian Guard not stabbing Ray and then the knife disappearing, because they both are errors that have significant bearing on the story. Because if you stab Ray, story's over. If Godzilla gets hit by these missiles that are of similar destructive potency to the jet missiles we see later on, it does have significant implications as to whether Godzilla would have lived to have gotten to the river, and we would have had the later ending chase as we do. Because actually, one sec, let me bring up the clip right here.
Wait, can I ask you a quick military question?
Yeah, shoot.
How strong are Sidewinders versus the F-18 missiles?
Sidewinder versus F-18. It's gonna be the destructive potency is gonna be a similar what's it called, yield. They're not gonna. There's no the yields are not too far apart in terms of number wise. So if he gets hit by those, it's still gonna hurt a lot more than getting hit by a tank round or rockets.
Okay,
And then
so
the other issue would also be with the torpedoes as well.
yeah, I was gonna ask that next.
Yeah, so the torpedoes, when they hit him, they should have injured him a lot more instead of just knocking him out. So in a lot of cases,
A lot more than burn marks, right? Because you do see
yeah,
burn marks on his side.
we see burn marks, but then you don't really like see anything get blown off like the F-18 shots do. And considering the fact, like a lot of people say it was probably rubble that saved him or not, but even then, like him getting hit by those would either the destructive yield just have been enough to have hurt him, and then where they hit him still would have been enough to hurt him more significantly than that. But the reason I think it's similar to the rain knife thing is because we see this shot right here, the same type of missiles, same dodge, but then later on we have that. And then also in this shot here, we see everything getting avoided. So clearly the intent behind the scene is that he's evading everything.
Yeah. But I would say that, like, when it comes to those missiles, I'd say he can tank up to 3 of those shots if he got hit.
So, okay. So in that case, if we say he tanks 3, there's one unaccounted for in the first trap. That we never see where that one goes, but probably should have hit him because he never tries to dodge it. He dodges 2. There's also the issue with him avoiding the sidewinders because he's colder than the buildings around him. That's fine. But then we see another one hit him where it should have hit him when he's getting chased down the street towards the river. So at least he hits 2, so that's already more than halfway over the supposed limit you gave.
Well, I only used the limit of like I'd say, well, because it was 12 missiles that took him down.
That's 12 missiles that took him down. But like he doesn't really try to escape much. Like never tries to like dig underneath the bridge to get the to like get him out of the cables that way. Like there's ways Godzilla that we've seen in the film that he could have escaped, but for some reason it chooses not to. And who's to say that with the missiles that should have hit him, that he would have been in the same delirious state that he was in, that he could have been taken down or at least hurt more significantly to where hypothetically he could be captured or found because of blood trails and stuff like that.
Well, I wouldn't say he'd be in a delirious state. Like he was shot by 6 missiles, trapped
we'll go
on
to the
top
scene
of a bridge with cables.
Well, again, so we'll show the scene.
Yeah.
And there's an ad running. I'll get that set up. Share the audio. Yes, I understand, Gordon Walker. Thank you for selling me my credit card.
O'Neill, nice trick with the cab ID.
Is it still laggy?
A little, yeah, but
okay. I think it's because there's someone else using like doing a Skype call or something. So that's probably why. But
don't worry, I've watched the movie enough times where I can recognize the audio and the visuals.
Okay.
Ooh.
Actually, we'll have to probably start from here. Actually, so
can I mention something?
Oh, one sec. Let me pause it. Yeah.
Okay. With that scene right there, I wanna. It's actually funny because, like, you know, I recognize it as an error, but like, did you notice the I call it the miracle cable because the cable comes out of nowhere.
Which cable are you pointing to? You talk about
the cable that Nick uses. Like, I can't find a reasonable way to explain where the cable comes from.
Oh, because there's going to be electrical wires and stuff underneath your pavement and stuff, because that's where all.
But it comes from above.
Well, no, because remember, no, it's coming from right here. See,
where is it? Well, can you explain it to me? I noticed this when I was watching it like a while back. Like the cable comes from no point where it could originate. It'd have to be on over his head from the other side.
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting. I never ever. Wow, that is. I will give you that. That is actually very interesting. I never realized that. Yeah, that is so interesting because the wire is dangling down. So he. That's interesting because if he did it from this way, that makes no sense. But if it was coming from the bottom and he directed it up, the same way works. That is.
See, that's why I call it the miracle wire, because it comes from nowhere. It would have to be from the other side over his head.
That's one thing I will say is that like literally that scene can work. It's just instead of it just being a cable towards the bottom, he can pick it up from the bottom, raise it up into his teeth. But if it's coming from the top, yeah, the wire should not be coming from the top. And I just feel that feels like an error that could easily be contextualized much better. But I never noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
That will give you that. That was a good one there. That was a good catch.
Yeah, I caught that a while ago.
Oh, is it not? Is it? Oh, so it's going over to the 10th. Oh yeah. Okay. There we go. I don't care. Yes, Bob's Burgers. Blah blah blah. Thank you.
Oh
thank
yeah,
you.
the anniversary is coming up. 24.
Bob's Burgers, the movie. But yeah, so get back to Fred.
Go, go, go!
So he's breaking through all these fine. The bridge is able to support him so far for the moment, but it's also breaking down too. Here's the thing, he decides to jump over this one.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously. Still trying to attack, But instead of jumping over this one, is when he decides to try to break through instead of jumping over like he could, because we know the other one could support him.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to run after him, he doesn't try to break down to keep chasing. Like, because remember, he does break through the bridge from the bottom to get to them. So obviously he knows he could have launched an attack from below.
Roger that.
From below where?
So from below the bridge, because remember, he attacked from below the bridge to get them in his mouth. And then he got up on the bridge and attacked again. And instead of choosing to try to dig below to get himself free of the cables this way, he decided to keep trying to move forward to pursue.
Wait, but dig below where? He's on top of the river. He's not going to dig anywhere.
Because if he digs below the river, he falls into the river and can escape.
Oh yeah, I guess there's that, but...
And see, he's continuing to move instead of trying to dig through that right there. Because if he's getting held down by this, wouldn't it make more sense for him to dig or burst through like he did back on that part of the bridge to escape?
Is he gonna take the bridge with him? And
probably.
Possibly
but
drown?
That also means, oh no. Let's also remember the fact that he was able to swim for like miles because he came from French Polynesia.
He didn't have a bridge on his back.
He didn't have a bridge on his back, but he'd also be more flexible in the water too. Because remember how he was able to evade the submarines.
But I mean, whales have a hard time swimming with a net on their tail.
Whales are also much smaller, but also 98 was able to burrow through all the concrete and bedrock inside New York City.
Yeah, but here he's tangled up on the bridge. If he takes the bridge with him with the cables, I doubt he'll be able to escape as easily.
Even if he wasn't able to escape as easily, he'd be much more able to escape rather than just sitting here like a literal sitting duck. And this is what error that the film also has, is that the river that they're below isn't as deep as it appears in the film, which is why you can't really have the submarine battle. But I'll let that go. I'll let that one go. But even if the river in this film is as deep as it appears earlier, that means all of this goes down with him. He's more flexible in the water. We've seen that. We know he can hold his breath for a long time. We also know he's strong enough to the point where he can survive. We know he's been able to survive torpedoes. We know he's been able to evade missiles. If he's in the water, that makes him an even colder target, which means they're not going to be able to lock onto him because he's not a clear shot. So if he's going to drown, it's going to take a long time for him to drown, but he has a much easier and more logical chance of escaping if he falls into the water.
But he'd have to do that like right at this instant before the military jets can like get at him.
Yeah, but again, remember he was able to burst his head through the bridge earlier pretty easily.
Well,
If he dips his head here, this whole thing falls because that's no longer supporting this. That goes in, he falls into the water. This is obviously already going. So by this point, it should be possible for him to escape this. And not to mention, this is already also coming off the fact that he chose to barrel through this instead of jumping on it like he did here. Because the issue the reason I'm breaking this all up is because they'll do things that are more logical beforehand and then do a decision that ultimately gets him killed because by this point he needs to die for the film. Unlike where in 54 or 84, where 84 he's just lured by his instincts because we already know that's a way to lure him out and then he falls in the Mount Minhara. Or in 54 where Godzilla's just kind of chilling, he's not really doing anything to pursue the humans, and of course there was no way to really counter the oxygen destroyer as it was. So what would you say your argument against that would be?
Other than, I guess, how you say, like, you know, the film needs him to die, I would say that the reasoning for him to die is reasonable. And then I guess
reasonable in like a logical way or reasonable in a narrative way?
I'd say both to an extent, because like narratively they have to get him trapped because that's the only way they can hit him. But of course, like, you know, like, aside from like, oh yeah, the clipping missiles, this is the only way you
missiles,
can
the fact that somehow he's colder than the buildings around him, or the twisting torpedoes that will curve up to hit a sub instead of what it was targeting. There's like the issue is that, like, again, taking in a void, it seems unreasonable, but when stacking upon all these other logical inconsistencies, it seems weird.
Sure, that's what I'd say. It could very well, but you know, I'd say that like within the film,
because
like,
I'd say, would there be an example of a Godzilla death or defeat that has similar logical errors to it? Because, for example, in Shin, Godzilla is also defeated, but we also see, to counter everything that he does, there are logical reasons behind it. So they obviously can't get near him because of his atomic breath and his point defense system. They exhaust that, so he's not able to use that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also had set up traps while he was sleeping, which allows them to knock him over. And even when they do knock him over, he's still able to get up and cause damage to the people around him. And there's also the tipping time clock of the radiation. And the time he freezes, it's by the skin of their teeth. And also including the fact that they would have tried to nuke Godzilla as well. So that's another that would be an example of a Godzilla defeat that has logical bearing behind it. With 54, we do see that you could say that Godzilla could have swam away, but when Serizawa said it would have turned Tokyo Bay into a cemetery, that's still more water and a lot of area he'd have to clear versus 98, who, in every logical sense, this is probably one of the easiest things he could have escaped from, but because it's by the end of the movie, he is not able to escape it.
Yeah, I agree.
But what else am I thinking of? Is there any other points you want to bring up at all, or no?
Let's see here. I guess if we can work our way back to, I guess there was one thing like when you mentioned all the stuff like of Godzilla's character when we were
Mhm.
comparing all of the Godzillas together, I wanted to ask like how much of that do you not see in Godzilla 98?
So I would say, obviously, not a extremely antagonistic force. A lot of 98 fans will say that Godzilla is not a monster; it's an animal just doing animal things. So therefore, the antagonistic malice that other incarnations have is not present there. Um, being an example of nature's mistakes, really outside. Well, we know that obviously Zia coming to New York caused damage, and that's obviously a mistake of humanity messing with nature. But when you look at logically what Godzilla would had to have done to travel all the way to New York, when logically there's other places that he could have gone, and in the scrapped script for the second film, he's able to live pretty comfortably outside of like humans being hurt. So I consider that a contrivance and not something that was thought out too well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, product of the bomb, that's like that is there, but at that point, if we're just talking about bare minimums, then that also seems like a very low bar for acceptance. And I think that even with all the very crazy out there Godzillas, they all can pass that bar much higher than 98 can.
The bar of being like the
Like
atomic.
accepting something because of the traits it shares, but if it's like very minimal traits that are there but we still accept it, versus others that have just as outlandish traits to them but are able to clear more bars, that's where I take the issue with.
And then going back to the nature's vengeance or how we affect nature.
Mhm.
Aside from like the contrivance of going to New York, like from what we see in the film, I think he depict that aspect very well, and I think that it helps with the animalistic side because.
But if the issue is that if it's nature's vengeance, then nature's vengeance can be defeated with a very mundane piece of hardware that every nation has essentially. So like
I would
hypothetically, if
suppose.
Godzilla attacked the UK, the British Royal Air Force can deal with Godzilla just as easily as America could under the same circumstances. Same thing if it was in Germany, Japan too, like Middle Eastern nations. Like the fact that Godzilla is able to be disposed of in that manner shows that like nature really isn't as strong as other Godzilla films because it is still weak to prolific weapons. Unlike, for example, in Shin Godzilla, where we needed the help of several nations, not to mention in like extreme ingenuity to understand concepts that most people wouldn't understand, the use of extremely advanced technology and sitting on the edge of battle, and even that fails. Or a super weapon that's even more destructive than the atomic bomb, which is still like nukes are the game changer in our modern world today. And hypothetically, the Oxygen Destroyer would change all of that if it was real. So again, nature's vengeance in those other films is even grander than what 98 has. In like, or like GMK, for example, you need literal like other monsters to fight against gods, like a force like Godzilla.
I guess if it's all up to like the power of Godzilla, how much of that needs to like does it have to be the most powerful or like because like it seems to be a lot of focus
It doesn't
on
even necessarily be the most powerful because we've seen things that have been able to take him down, but there should be a commentary on that power in relation to Godzilla. So the reason why 54's Oxygen Destroyer is so significant and why later incarnations are less significant is because it's contextualized as being so much greater than the atomic bomb that is why its use is extremely horrific, even against something like Godzilla, where nature's wrath is powerful, but we are still creating more and more destructive weapons. And if we continue to make more and more destructive weapons, we'll make more monsters. And that's why people like conceptually like the idea of Destroyer. I know a lot of people will say that like how he was handled in his film wasn't the best, but conceptually, Destroyer is closer to Godzilla in that sense than 98 would be, because Destroyer was made from an even stronger, more terrifying use of a powerful weapon.
Yeah,
or even
but
King Ghidorah is closer to Godzilla in that sense in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah because of how he was made. There's examples that we see throughout the series where Godzilla doesn't necessarily need to be the most powerful, but the meditations that the film actually has about these concepts are what make it actually good and significant.
but I would argue that like Godzilla 98's power isn't so much in his strength, but like I guess in his asexual reproductions, because like even if
Well,
it
then at that
seems
point,
you
it's
can
not really
easily
like then Godzilla really isn't powerful on his own. Godzilla needs other things to do have the power for him. So, and even if it's because of asexual reproduction, they're still killed by missiles, and it's possible that you could kill all these baby Godzillas in a similar way. And actually, if we're gonna get like super hypothetical, realistic, if these babies are growing up hunting humans, and they're going to be less cautious around people, which means it's more likely for them to get killed, as we see with a lot of animals that interact around humans. Those that like don't really know how to act will more likely die. And although like of course they're all born pregnant, we don't know how long it's going to take for them to actually mature to the point where they're going to start laying eggs. But at that point, it just becomes conjecture, and we're just writing a whole nother film. But from what we see, these animals are still just as susceptible to very easily accessible weapons as the adult one is. Not to mention the fact that the people we do see get killed are carrying extremely low caliber weapons, and there's very few of them. If you got like if Hicks had directed almost all of his soldiers there to be fighting against the babies, with like even M16s, which are a lot more have much more puncture power than an MP5, LMGs, even just handheld rockets or grenades, you're going to be dealing with the babies a lot better than the French Secret Service did. And they were only going to use bombs, but they were clearly pretty confident in the fact that they could use their explosives to destroy the babies.
well, destroy the babies in terms of them not being hatched. But if we take into account, if we want to include the series in it, the sexual maturity of them is within like a month to 3 years, I'd say.
A month to 3. If we say it's a month, if it's 3 years, and that's 3 years that all of the entire U.S. military would probably be on guard to deal with these threats, because we already saw what one did to to one city. So of course that threat's going to escalate more, and there would be more forces, unless we want to assume that like the president or other nations wouldn't then mobilize to deal with the threat.
But in both the series and in the would-be sequel, the baby was able to elude the military for a good considerable amount of time, even if
because remember that was also with Nick's help too. So Nick did allow the baby to escape as a baby, but hypothetically, if the military knows there's a nest, they're going to go deal with the nest in force. And even if the baby escapes, we do see that in the hypothetical sequel that they were able to almost kill Godzilla in A New Family and then kill the babies except for the runt in the sequel. So they aren't exactly like Ultimate Ninja Warriors when it comes to stealth. And then actually, ironically, if we're gonna say if we're gonna say Zilla and Godzilla 98 aren't the same, then ironically enough, Zilla is more capable of surviving than 98, because in Planet of the Monsters, the books, we do see that they are able to evade the military and actually just keep respawning, making them a much worse threat than 98 was. So like if the argument is that 98 and Zilla are two different things, we can't attribute one thing to the other, then the super stealthy babies, they're able to reproduce and essentially be more trouble than the adults. doesn't apply to 98 because in New Family he almost dies, and in the proposed sequel the babies would have died, and Godzilla probably would have died as well without Nick and Co helping.
I would say yes. In terms of like equating Zilla and Godzilla, my only thing would be is not so much that they're completely different entities, because like I've acknowledged that yeah, Zilla and Godzilla are of the same characters, just different iterations. I always felt
Would
like,
it make sense to call 98 Zilla 98, Zilla 04, Zilla IDW, Zilla Oblivion, Zilla
but we
Monster
already do that
Apocalypse?
though.
Not always, not a lot. Some people will say Godzilla 98 and then they'll say Zilla for everything else. Like they won't differentiate it by incarnation like we do with the Godzillas.
But we do differentiate it with other Godzillas. We say Godzilla 2000, Godzilla 84. They're all different iterations.
Well, the thing is that again, if Zilla 98 are the same character, then calling 98 Godzilla 98 Zilla 98 is just as valid as saying Godzilla 98. But with 98 and then Zilla, it's always 98 and then people will usually say Zilla. They never differentiate them by the incarnations or where they came from. So no one says Zilla 04, no one says Zilla Rulers of Earth or Zilla IDW or Zilla Oblivion or Zilla Monster Apocalypse or stuff like that. Unlike with the Godzillas, where we are very clear about the how we categorize the Godzillas.
But is it invalid to do so if we want to differentiate iterations?
No, explain what you mean.
Well, just like if I wanted to say like Zilla IDW or Zilla Oblivion, is it invalid to want to differentiate the iterations of that character?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that is what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people don't usually do. I'm saying people don't usually do that. Like it's very rare that people will do that. I'm pointing to the fact that it's rare, not the fact that it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And then also, again, because people don't like to acknowledge the fact that Toho sees that no distinction between the characters, there's usually a need to say Godzilla 98 rather than just saying Zilla 98, when both would hypothetically be just as valid as one or the other.
Okay.
Because unlike, for example, with people usually like to bring up Kiryu as an example where we don't call the show Mechagodzilla Kiryu 1. Unlike with 98 and Zilla, where Kiryu became synonymized with a different Mechagodzilla incarnation or a different mecha entirely, they're just called Mechagodzilla. And even interestingly enough, we'll call them by their numbers. So we'll say Showa Mechagodzilla is Mechagodzilla 1. People will say Mechagodzilla 2, Mechagodzilla 3, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Or and then the only times that where there'll be differences where we don't say Gigan 1 or Gigan 2 is, for example, with modified Gigan, we don't say Gigan 2, we just say modified Gigan.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
But is it similar to differentiating 98 versus like 04 Zilla?
But yeah, you can do that and say
like in terms of
Zilla, 98
logistics,
Zilla.
Like personal matters aside, like logistically, is that like a viable option?
To do what?
Like just like the differentiating of like Gigan versus modified Gigan, or saying I get even if it's Zilla 98 or like Godzilla 98 versus 04 Zilla or Oblivion Zilla versus Godzilla 98. Is that the same ballpark?
I would say that it's a similar ballpark, but a different ballpark because there is no other monster in the series that had a new incarnation made for it that was separate from its original trademark. That is the difference there. So going back to, like, for example, or actually a good example would be like Death Ghidorah and King Ghidorah. Death Ghidorah was always its own creation. It was its own type of Ghidorah, but it never got synonymized into King Ghidorah. So like we don't call it King Ghidorah Death or something like that. It's just Death Ghidorah. Or even Ghidorah 98, like the 98 King Ghidorah is just called King Ghidorah. like we'll call it things like Grand King Ghidorah, but really it's just called King Ghidorah.
And
Like, you know which King Ghidorah I'm saying when I say King Ghidorah 98, right?
which one was that one?
The Rebirth of Mothra one.
Yeah. Okay, I
Okay.
thought so.
Yeah.
So those are different versions of like that. Is that a different kaiju entity or like just a different
Just a
Ghidorah?
version of Ghidorah. Although in Death Ghidorah's case, it's a different kaiju that has the name Ghidorah in it. But unlike with Zilla 98, it wasn't like, oh, we're taking this version of King Ghidorah that we don't like and making it its own monster with Ghidorah in the name.
Okay. Well, being like the whole inception of Zilla was just to avoid confusion of having two Godzillas in Final Wars, wasn't it?
Well, they wanted to use the American Godzilla, but they just decided, they're just going to make it its own monster. But even then, we do see in the Godzilla trading card battle before Zilla was trademarked that we have USA Godzilla as its own thing. And then post 2004, anytime we see the design, it's just Zilla usually.
How much of that is due to the unpopularity of the incarnation?
I would say 40-60 probably. 40%
Okay.
where people just don't like the design. But for example, in Japan, people don't really have like as big of a hate boner for Zilla as a lot of people in America do. But in Kaiju Collection, which was Japanese exclusive, they don't use Godzilla 98 as an incarnation, although there are a lot of Godzilla incarnations in that game, but they do have Zilla. Or with same thing, with Rulers of Earth, they wanted to use American Godzilla, so they use Zilla, although they were going to use more of like the abilities that 98 had, like the power breath, but they instead just wanted Zilla to not have that ability. So clearly when they were adding like new incarnations to Zilla, they were thinking about 98 at the time.
Okay. Well, when it comes to abilities and differentiating it, because with that instance, including or not including the power breath, and then also with the IDW, I think Matt Frank said he wanted to do the series abilities, but Toho said no.
No, he wanted to use the 98 abilities. Toho said no to that. That was on his Tumblr for Kaiju Samurai back in the day.
It was the 98 abilities?
Yeah, so the power breath and stuff. As well as they wanted to make the design, they wanted to make it closer to 98. So like all the things he could do in 98 would have been more closer to that, not like in the series stuff.
So then where does that play into the validity of the differentiating the characters or the iterations?
I would say it matters the same way as just saying Zilla 98, Zilla 04, etc.
All right.
Because what would you say in response to that?
Well, I would say that if we're gonna go by like picking and choosing what power sets, it could be important to the validation of differentiating Godzilla 98 from Zilla iterations as just separate iterations of the entity, I'd say.
Well, yeah, again, you can still do that by saying Zilla 98, Zilla, Zilla, the series Zilla, 04 Zilla,
Okay.
IDW Zilla, etc.
All right. So bottom line is just like it's within validity to just say different iterations of the character.
Yeah.
All right. Gotcha.
In Zilla's case, yeah, because like you can still say Godzilla 98. I'm not saying that you can't say that, but I'm saying it's just as valid logically and based on what the intent of the creators is to say Zilla 98 or Godzilla 98.
All right.
But any other things you want to bring up at all or no?
Oh well, I guess just the aspect of like the nature's like if we're not saying nature's vengeance, what about like nature's consequence or
Nature's
something like that? Is that
consequence.
the same thing?
Well, I would say with vengeance. Well, the consequences, nature's consequences could be nature's vengeance, but what would be the distinction you're making between consequences and vengeance?
Well, I guess if we want to say with normal Godzillas and how they have a more vengeful aspect, like
Mm-hmm.
even if this one isn't like, because you say an important factor of Godzilla's like characterization is his like intentional malice towards humanity, right?
That is an aspect that can be, yes.
And like, are you saying it's detrimental if we wanted to have it be more so just as a consequential aspect to it instead of like an intentional malice? Because like Emmerich has stated that like this Godzilla was more so like a large animal and
Mhm.
created by us due to like our influence on nature, and this is a consequence of that.
Yeah,
And the
but
consequence is part of like the whole like, even if we may be able to deal with it temporarily, like because we can never guarantee that we could like kill all Godzillas, because like within the film we see there's still one left, with the possibility of it becoming like um the possibilities is still there for like a planet of monsters scenario. Like that is part of this character, this aspect of Godzilla that like Emmerich chose to focus on.
it's a possibility, but because we know Godzilla can be killed quite easily in comparison to other Godzillas, the hypothetical scenario of another Godzilla appearing and being just as destructive as the first is less likely than in the end of 54, where if another Godzilla appeared, it would be much more disastrous because we wouldn't have the oxygen destroyer this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand from that level. So because of the significance of needing something like the oxygen
And also, I
destroyer.
would also say another thing is that that's also sorry for cutting you off, but it's similar to the again they would make 98 closer to the Rhedosaurus, because if in that film, if they kept on working with the bombs, they could awaken another animal from a bygone age.
All right, though we do see some of that in like what the series would be and what the potential trilogy would have been.
Well, with the sequels, we do see that this Godzilla becomes closer. I would say closer to like a Showa or Heisei, in the sense that it's not directly antagonistic towards humanity, but it's living alongside them, which then also counters the fact of nature's consequences, because we see a Godzilla that was actually able to live on its own, not hurt people, and that was sort of the implied ending, you could say, for that planned
But
sequel, and that's even more so in GTS.
sure, but like, what about like, can we guarantee that for a long time? Because like Nick's relationship with like the Godzilla aside, if that wasn't like there, how long would be able to share the planet with Godzilla plus other similar mutations included?
Well, because again, that is true, and that's why GTS is closer to a normal Godzilla, in comparison to the to
98.
as opposed to 98. Yeah.
Well, how much of that is due to just like this being the first film and what would have been a trilogy and like
The
further
reason I can't say that
franchise?
is because none of what's done in this film prohibits the use of a more traditional Godzilla. That's the point I'm making. Because you could do what the sequel did and have a more traditional Godzilla, and the
Mm-hmm.
films work just as fine.
But okay, so what if I brought up the aspect of like what Godzilla's impact on the city was, and if that went on a more global scale, as we see in the film, like it goes up from like what we can see a Godzilla do, like with just one, and then the threat of there being more on a global scale, even bigger scale. even if we can like say that we can easily take him down, the fact that this Godzilla has such a strong reproductive power, and then we add the fact that other similar creatures will continue to rise, like unless we do something like stopping the weapons testing and
Well,
other.
because the thing is that in that case, we do know in GTS that at this point we do have a Godzilla on our side, so we don't really have to worry as much. But in the case, actually, in both cases, in both the sequel and the actual show, both of those are happenstance where we don't have to worry about that. But
How much so? Would it be any dissimilar to like how like even though like other countries have nuclear weapons, we have some too, so we don't have to worry about it?
in the
Because like
case
it's
of
not like
like,
having these monsters and just having one on our side is gonna make it any better or worse.
well, in the universe, in that universe, it's actually a lot better because we see that Godzilla is globe-trotting fighting other monsters, so the world is definitely a lot safer. And of course, not everything in Godzilla series is the result of nuclear weapons either.
Yeah,
Like
not nuclear
Schuster is
weapons,
in
but other environmental
well, not even just environmental stuff, because some of it's just
aliens.
we see what we see just either just things to do with like either climate control, production for food. We see weapons. Excuse me. There was that one time where they found that the Sphinx, which is completely unrelated to like anything. But yeah, no. I would say in this case, what would be the point you're particularly making there?
That we can make allusions to like how we affect the environment, and that it's not just a one and done, oh just shoot them down. Like, you know, there's still that allegorical sense of him being related to the bomb and his impact, that like I guess that what was that
But yes,
circular, I don't know, just that like that cycle of just creating.
it could be, but again, because of what 98 is,
Mhm.
it's a lot easier for us to be able to probably live with that more than any other Godzilla. I'm not saying it's gonna be like sunshine and rainbows, but it's gonna be a lot easier. It's gonna be less. This is like the worst thing that could happen, and more like it's gonna be bad, but we can definitely deal with it. It's very possible we have the technology to deal with it.
Well, I guess I try to say like, what if we compare it to the MonsterVerse and Shin Godzilla, where we have that like now we have to live with this aspect of it.
I would say in the case of Shin Godzilla, for example, if another monster appears, we don't know if the U.S. nuke timer goes off, and that means Japan gets nuked. Unlike in 98, where if another Godzilla appears, round up the military again for another lizard hunt. And in the MonsterVerse, the biggest change for Godzilla is that he's not like a mutation, but part of like the Earth's natural ecosystem. But it's a balance that like we need to get used to. So it is going to be a change for humanity, but that's going to be the overall most positive change where we have to live with Godzilla.
So 98 wouldn't live up to either of those things, you'd say.
I would say the one thing it does closer in the letter, like more of the letter of the idea is that 98 is following the footsteps more of anti-nuclear messaging rather than the MonsterVerse. But as a character, it's not going to be able to carry it as much as a more faithful Godzilla or be as impactful as others are, unlike MonsterVerse, which is doing its own thing in comparison.
Okay, so it's down to the character itself and what we see of him in the film that is the detriment to that.
Indeed, because we do know that, like, because again, you can have a lot of things happen in 98 similarly, but the incarnation for Godzilla, if it's just more faithful, it could still all work. Like, there's many small details that you could change overall, and the story works. It's probably not going to be like the most amazing Godzilla ever, but it's definitely going to be much more passable than what we got.
And I guess it would all just boil down to the invulnerability and power aspect of it,
The
right?
invulnerability power aspect, and then how that's translated into the story. So, like, easy quick fix. Have you read any of the other Godzilla scripts at all, or no? For like before 98 was chosen,
The scripts for 98,
like no, like
or
the John DeBont Godzilla or the Decker Godzilla stuff like that.
I haven't read them. I've only like watched
Stuff on
synopses
them.
of them.
Okay, so like for example, instead of for example, the in King of Monsters 3D, they have a special kind of missile that is used to kill Godzilla. Essentially, you can use that, load them on the F-15s. It's gonna still be a little bit more dicey for people, but if you contextualize it, it's gonna make more sense. Same thing is that like change up some aspects of 98's design, is more people are going to be accepting of it. There's just the fact is that it's not like an irreversible mess that like a lot needs to change, but there's certain things that are going to work more than others, like also removing like the hatchling subplot, things like that.
Speaking of rewrites, have you ever read my thread on a rewrite?
I
think I had a pinned thread of like what I would do to rewrite Godzilla.
Is it 98. On your which Twitter is it on?
My personal one.
It's on your personal one? Okay. Because usually it's your what's it called? It's your main one that I end up seeing more of your stuff on rather than
the G98 one?
Yeah, the Appreciator one I see more get posted on.
Yeah, for my personal one, I haven't.
Okay, and I've definitely seen this one before. I have seen this before. Okay. I would say probably, if anything, it would. What time is it right now? Oh, actually, it's 8:57, so we're about to hit. Actually, so what I'm gonna do is, in this case, I think this was a good discussion. I want to wrap it up at 9 exactly, and what we're gonna do is next week, we're gonna do another stream talking about our ideas for a Godzilla 98 rewrite. I'm gonna save your tweet thread in bookmarks, and then we're gonna plan around that, because I think this would be an interesting discussion we could also have, but I don't think we have much more time tonight to do that. And if anything, Defender, because I know you're muted probably because of your dog.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. Did you hear what I said, or do you want me to repeat that?
No, like we're gonna do a separate discussion on rewrites, right?
Yeah, we'll do a separate discussion on rewrites. I know there's some other people who have rewrites, and I'm thinking it'd be interesting to do a round robin to see what everyone's ideas would be.
Yeah, that'd be fun for another stream.
And it's less debating, and it's more like ideas, theory crafting, what people think would be good or interesting for a possible change to 98. But since we got 2 minutes left, do you want to give just some closing thoughts?
All right, so we're wrapping it up tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up at 9, and then we'll plan for Sunday next week. And I want to see if I can get some more people on who I know have rewrites.
Yeah. Okay. It was a fun time here again. You know, agreed on a lot of aspects. I still disagree slightly on some things, but you know, just an agree to disagree thing. It was just really fun, you know, like talking about it. And I'm glad you let me come back.
Yeah, no, like I would say this for anyone who's interested about getting on a stream. As long as like it doesn't get super personal or like angsty aggressiveness, I'm gonna let people keep coming back on the streams in most cases. So if anyone's worried about that, or if like they say something wrong that I don't like, I'm not gonna keep them back on. No, you're able to come back on. That's not an issue at all.
Great. I was really happy I was able to share that one cable scene with you because I didn't know if you knew that.
No, I did not know that, and I'm thankful now that I did see that. I'm also happy that there was another thing when it came to the missile clip that I did not realize it's being another error, and it's interesting because you'll always like you think you know everything about something, but you always find something new.
Yeah, and I like to think that that's what I bring to the table. I probably watched this film more than anyone on either side of this topic. I like to watch this film because I always discover something new about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I even noticed the mistakes. You know, like the clipping. You know, just to wrap it up, that's the value I take from this film. Like, even if I watch it over and over again, there's still something new I can find, good or bad, interesting or mundane. You know, that's just what I appreciate from this film, personally, faults and all.
Mm-hmm. I would say definitely in my case, I would say this film is important because it helps me understand better how to construct rhetoric. Just looking at the sort of history of the franchise, where things went, because this is definitely a sort of watershed moment for the franchise, and I think more in more ways than people realize, and because it's something people are passionate about on both sides, I'm able to get a lot of discussion about it, which I think is important. But yeah, I'm definitely interested to see if I can bring on more people to discuss their 98 rewrites.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. But we went over the
Yeah, I
thing
guess
at
I gotta let you
901,
go
which
now.
it's fun. It just I have things I need to take care of tonight as well. But I thank you for coming on. I thank you lot for staying. And as always, it's been Zimzilla, and I will see you all next time. Hopefully Sunday we can discuss those 98 rewrites. See y'all.